I've done a lot of talks like this about, specifically about the global industrial versus the local sustainable food system. I'm sure a lot of you have heard a lot of this stuff, but hopefully I can give you a bit of perspective from a farmer who has his hands in the dirt. Before I start, I'd like to say that my partner Jess Weatherhead is here with me, and she's as much a part of the farm as I am, and we started it together, and we've been working hard at it ever since. Global industrial versus local sustainable food systems. The global industrial food system, as we all know, is very good at a few different things. One of them is to take very complicated machinery and techniques and systems and combine them with chemical fertilizers and synthetic pesticides and herbicides, and as a result, vastly increase the amount of yield that our farm systems are able to produce on an acre of land. In some cases, with some crops, up to a 700% difference from 1929 to, or in the last 100 years. And then this food is whisked away from where it's grown through our massive interstate highway system into warehouses where it's held for differing amounts of time until it finally ends up in a place we know very well, which, as most children think, is where food comes from, the grocery store. And it's a vast plethora of differing foodstuffs that we can get at all times. And it's amazing that right now I could walk down the road to Metro and find all of this produce freshly available, fruit from all around the world that I could get at a very low price and enjoy in the middle of the winter. That's, in the history of the evolution of mankind, that is completely unheard of, man and womankind. At the same time, the price of food has dropped astoundingly. The proportion that we spend has gone from a quarter of all of our income to under 10%. And all of these things are really good. There's no doubting it, and that's a part of the big reason why we're here in this room, is because if it was all bad, we wouldn't be doing it at all. There are definitely some good things about the global industrial food system, but you always have to weigh the pros and the cons. And when it comes to our food system, the cons mainly come in the form of externalities. And these aren't things that we pay for when we get to the checkout counter. These are the things that many other actors and players in the food system pay for. The main one being the environment. Through the wonders of industrial agriculture, our soils have been greatly depleted of their biological life over the last century, to the point where many of them have no life in them at all. They're merely used to hold plants up. Our aquifers have been drained to a vast extent, and we're gonna have a very challenging year in California, where they're facing record droughts. The runoff of pollution from fertilizers and pesticides, as someone talked about earlier, has created vast algal blooms that prevent a lot of different life from thriving in our water systems. CO2, agriculture is a huge source of greenhouse gases. Animal welfare, it's a nightmare. Some of these, a lot of these places, if we could see it as we're thinking about buying the meat on the shelf, we would never do it. Worker welfare is also a very challenging aspect. It's hard for farmers to find people to work on their farms because the conditions are so difficult and unsafe. So it depends a lot on migrant labor, which is another issue. And farmers, there's far less of them than there ever were. So whereas 60% of us lived in the country and 40% of us were farmers only 100 years ago, now less than 2% of us are farmers and only 30% of us live in the country. Whether or not that's a bad thing or a good thing is kind of a subjective question, but the country is a place that we should care for. So, and then one of the major aspects of modern agriculture is that we're focusing all the power of modern agriculture on very few crops, mainly corn soybeans, rice, and wheat. And so when we look at the amazing variety of products that come out of the corporations that produce our foodstuffs, if we look very closely at them, like at these different cereal brands, we find that they're all made of the same things. And then if we look at the entire aisle of the grocery store, if you look at all the ingredients, again, you find that they're all the same stuff. And eating all this same stuff in such unbalanced ratios has led to a lot of health problems with us, with human beings in general. Obesity being a huge one, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all these things are on the rise, despite the fact that we're the most medically advanced civilization to ever have lived on the planet. And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that we look at food as a society. I mean, individually, a lot of people don't look at it this way. Maybe they don't think about it, but we look at it as a society as a product of mass production. So like an automobile or an iPhone, we try and find ways to produce it as cheaply as possible and as easily, readily available for the end consumer. It's a widget. It doesn't matter where it's produced or by who. All that really matters is what it looks like and how much it costs. Which is astounding, considering that we put it in our bodies 3 times a day. Taste is just something that's created in a laboratory. And the most interesting thing is that a lot of the time we look a lot like the cattle in the feedlot when we line up to eat it. Because part of being in this production system is that we've turned the culture of eating food into, again, the most convenient, quick process possible. So, all the while, the corporations are making loads of money, as we know. And I think that's really the point, is that there's one group of people that are really benefiting from the global industrial food system. And for the most part, it isn't any of us. It's the system. So we're all implicated, and I'm not going to blame the companies. I'm not going to say that we're totally victims, because of course we're not. We all play a huge role. But if we allow corporate goals to dictate how our food is produced and how we eat it, we're going to get what we have now. So I think it's interesting to look at agriculture and break it up into its component parts. Half of the word is culture, and that's what we forget a lot of the time. We think of culture as being music and clothing and language, and most of us would associate it with food, right? I would think. So just as a little test, I just want you to I want you to yell out what culture or region, geographic locale you think of when you see the following pictures. We're just going to put this, agriculture is culture, to the test, okay? So yell it out. Chinese, right. Japanese, right. Oh yeah.
Ethiopian.
Ethiopian.
Yeah, that's in
Uh-huh.
Quebecois.
Quebecois, French Canadian. All right, this next one's a tough one. Ottawa. All right. And then this is a trick one. Does anyone recognize that?
From the works.
It's from, this is actually, well, it was in the Citizen, prominently displayed, and I remembered it. It's from Artisan Bakery. It's their brunch burger.
Oh my goodness.
So,
I've made so many.
have you?
So long.
So long to eat or so long to make?
So long to make. I was
yeah.
in the kitchen for a while, and those burgers take so long to make, and they're always falling over.
Oh, you work there?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, cool. So,
How do you get your mouth in there?
yeah. But I think the really interesting thing for me when I was putting this together is how hard it is to come up with a truly Canadian food.
Yeah.
Poutine, okay, sure. And beaver tails, fine. And then we could go back to, you know,
Except they were called elephant ears when they were first made.
there you go, elephant ears. Yeah. Which makes you think that they're not from here, really,
No,
right?
they're-
So, and I think that's a big challenge. If someone mentioned something about an Asian stir fry, or what was it, noodles, and about how that's not necessarily local. And that's a real challenge for us in this part of the world, is now to establish what is local and what our identity, what we want our identity to be around food. And it's an exciting task, and it's an exciting project, and it's something that's ongoing, and it's something we have to tackle together. And I think it makes sense to really look at local producers and what they do and how they do it, and support them in a way that allows all of these local products to arrive. And they are. For example, you know, Stone Soup Kitchen, Jackie is going to be cooking at the well, and she's created this food truck that goes around town and has an identity. Now, soup isn't Canadian, but Stone Soup is Canadian, and it is Ottawa, and it is our local area. And recognizing that that culture can be created and can be really supported and loved is, I think, one of the first steps. So, wait, what about this one?
Market.
Fantasy.
Yeah, that's one of the shares from our farm. What's that? One of our CSA shares. So we grow food and people get a delivery every week. So that was 1 week that's what everyone got in their share. So that was all grown in Manotick, which is 25 minutes away. And not to honk our own horn here, but there's an amazing amount of things that can be grown in the local area, and there's an amazing amount of culture that could come from that if we so choose to support it, if we so choose to have that culture back in our life. And I think it's important to recognize that we're really lacking, like all over North America. You know, you go to Europe and they have their food culture. Every region has its things that they produce and that they've done for centuries, and that identifies the region and the place. And we could have that too. There's no reason why we couldn't. And I always think it's interesting that despite the fact that we're the richest society that's ever lived on the face of the planet, we don't feel we can afford to sit down and eat food together. We don't feel we can afford to have our own local regional dishes, because it would cost so much more and take so much more time than going to Tim Hortons. So I think that's one of the challenges. So our farm, I'll talk about our farm for a bit, and this might be all stuff you've heard before, but at the end of it you can ask questions and we can have a conversation. But I just want to talk a little bit about how I think agriculture can be in a local context and how important that is. So agriculture, I feel, should be a place where you know the person who's growing your food. And Jess's picture should be up there too, but she's later. And despite the fact that they're crazy,
Is that you?
Glasses and a degree.
yeah, that's me. Yeah, with really messy hair. So it should be a place where you know the person who's growing your food. You know you have a relationship with them and you trust them. You wouldn't go to anyone to get drugs if you were sick, right? You go to your doctor. You wouldn't go into an alleyway and just pick it up from whoever happens to be standing there. But we feel like we can get food from anyone, regardless of how it's grown and how it's produced. And we put a lot of faith in our institutions to make sure that it's safe for us, despite the fact that it may not be. Agriculture should be safe. It should be safe for the people who grow it. It should be safe for the people who eat it. It should be safe for the people who work on the farm, and it should be safe for the entire biota that's around that farm system. But organic for us is so much more than just safety. It's about really supporting the environment around the farm. So on our farm, we grow cover crops just for the sake of supporting the soil. We won't grow vegetables on the land for an entire year. We'll just grow cover crops. We'll till it back into the soil to make sure that the biological life is fully supported and has time to regenerate after a year of producing vegetables. We make sure that we have lots of crops on the farm that can support a diversity of insect life. So that between our beds of vegetables, we don't mind taking out space to have a bed of flowers that will attract pollinators of all different kinds, and also supports a variety of life below and above the ground. We like to make sure that all of our crops do double duty. So not only does it attract pollinators and make sure that the balance of insects on the farm is level and there's never an outbreak of something too extreme, but we have beautiful flowers to bring to people to put in their houses. Isn't she cute? Agriculture, we feel, should be about growing a diversity of crops. Not one or two, but 50, 60, 70, 100 varieties. And between the vegetables and flowers on the farm, we grow over 100 varieties of plants. Diversity is really the key. And diversity is what supports not only a healthy farm, but a healthy society. And a diversity of food is what makes for a healthy culture. On our farm, those crops are planted in amongst each other in a way that promotes not only a diversity of insect life, but a balanced way of extracting nutrients from the soil. We rotate all of our crops around the farm so that they take nutrients in a balanced way and don't ever overburden the soil. Local sustainable agriculture should be about always thinking about double duty. So, whereas on a conventional farm, if we had too many weeds, we would spray herbicides. On our farm, we put down tons and tons of straw mulch. And that prevents the weeds from growing, but it also provides very important food and habitat for all the biology in the soil when the straw breaks down. In the picture, you can see the black stuff that looks like plastic. And it's not plastic, it's actually biodegradable cornstarch that degrades into the soil at the end of the year, but while it's on the soil, it holds the moisture in, it prevents weeds from growing, and it heats up the soil.
Excuse me, how long does that take to,
It's kind of falling apart midway through the season.
oh,
Yeah, and by the end of the year, it's gone, totally gone. Yeah. So on a local sustainable farm, we feel that agriculture should be expressed by having beautiful, delicious, and very nutrient-dense foods that have so many nutrients in them that you can barely hold them. We feel that it's important to have interesting, locally sourced meals all year long. To be able to put together something in the middle of the winter that's delicious and inviting and that makes me not for a second think about running to the grocery store to buy a box of lettuce. But one of the most important aspects of the farm is really the community one. So for our employees, it's important that we're a team, that we're having fun, that work on the farm is an exploration and an educational opportunity, that we really take pride in what we grow and the results of our work and seeing what happens every day and how it pops out of the soil, and that we really view everything as a learning challenge. Learning challenge. Our farm is a place for our community to gather. And we look at this as a double duty too. When our CSA members come out to help us pull garlic, we give them a workshop on growing garlic. Then they get a real sense of what it's like to be on a farm and what a day in the life of a farmer is like. We know it's good, it's safe for them to be there because we don't use any chemicals that are going to harm them. They might get sunburned or be annoyed, but they'll get over it. It's a safe place for kids to be, and that's a really important part of what we do. And we have a lot of school groups come to the farm, and we're always trying to do education and outreach. And finally, it's a place where people can come together and have a meal. And we do that with our CSA members a few times a year. That's really one of the most important things, is that people take the time to share food and make a little bit of culture out of the food they eat. There's one more thing, which is also very important for the mission of the well, which is doing a little bit extra to make sure that the food that you grow can make it to less than wealthy people. So this is the food bank, and we've over the years we've grown a lot of crops specifically for the food bank to ensure that people that can't necessarily afford to go to the market or get a CSA share have access to our food. So we'd like to challenge you all, and you're all here, and I think that that's the first step, but to help us create this new culture around food, this new agriculture, to really challenge yourself to make food a part of your life that you're going to be proud to share with others and your kids, and to share with your community, and to build something that will be our community for as long as we can imagine. And that's it.